Awesome! Alright, you guys have learned Socrates' secret. That is ridiculously cool, super powerful. And hopefully you got a really great strategy to call people with and have sort of as your opening line. It's really helped increase response rate for myself and my clients, so I hope it helps you as well. I'm super excited now to talk to you guys about the safety valve and handling complaints. This one is just so massive. And it's a concept that embarks and it kind of collects with a lot of other really core concepts. They'll kind of come together to this one core idea that's in this chapter. So I'm really excited about it. Let's go over to the computer and let's make it happen. All right, cool. So the challenge is, most people trying to win others to their way of thinking, they're kind of putting themselves on a pedestal and they're trying to say, hey, everyone come up to me, right? And the challenge is they do too much talking about themselves and not enough about others. So here's the key, right? Let the other person talk themselves out. You really want to make someone talk until they're so exhausted and so tired that they have nothing else to say. Once you do this, it's gonna change everything. It makes them so powerful. So the idea is that they know more about their business and they know about their problems so much more than you do. So ask them questions and let them answer those questions. It will pay off. Let them tell you a few things. If you disagree with them, you may be tempted to interrupt. Do not interrupt. Let people stream out all of their thoughts and their emotions and their flowing, their statements on you, because nobody actually listens to people. And so if you can actually listen to somebody, not interrupt them, care about what they're saying, and be genuinely interested in it, it'll make them feel so significant, so special, and so important, and thereby create a really insane amount of reciprocity. You got to keep paying attention, because if you don't pay attention while they still have a lot of ideas in their own crying for expression, they're gonna hate you. So listen patiently with an open mind. Be sincere about it. Let them express themselves fully and encourage them to express themselves fully. Say, look, I want to know what's up. You don't want to have people build up stuff for years and years and then you start to ask them what's going on and then they have 5 years of junk to try to tell you. That's not the goal. The goal is to be always kind of constantly in flow. And see, here's the thing, right? This is something that I kind of discovered when I was first getting into meditation, right? I would have all this built up stress and emotion and stuff at the beginning, and then I would start meditating and it would be like opening up a floodgate and it would just come out everywhere and it would blur, it would go all over the place. But then I would have a lot less stress, right? And so then I would meditate, I would open up the floodgate, and then you would just have a lot less of this stuff come out. And then over time, the stress is still there, but the floodgate, you let it go out and it just goes out gradually. And so every day I meditate twice a day, and so I'll have just a little bit of stress come out, a little bit of stuff, little bit. Not a giant mountain of it going everywhere. So at the beginning, if you're not listening to other people, you're building up this giant mountain of thoughts and emotions and feelings and destruction and negativity in their mind because they're not getting listened to. But if you actually listen to them, at first it might be a little bit overwhelming. It's tough at the beginning. But then after that, it works out really well because they have significantly less things to talk about and they're always upfront with you. They're always transparent with you. They're always connected with you and they always have that same feeling of deep and devout care for each other. Right? And that's critical, that's foundational, that's crucial. And it all comes from letting them be open, letting them talk, and listening to them when they talk. Does policy pay in business? Let's see. As long as you're sincere and you encourage them, it should work. Here's a story of a sales representative who was forced to try it, who's forced to stop interrupting. One of the largest automobile manufacturers in the US was negotiating for a year's requirements of upholstery fabric. 3 important manufacturers had worked up fabrics and sample bodies, and these had all been inspected by the executives of the motor company. And notice had been sent to each manufacturer saying that on a certain day, a representative from each supplier would be given an opportunity to make a final pitch for the contract, right? So you got this one guy, and you kind of got a panel, but these are all the decision makers, and they're gonna hear from these 3 companies. And one of these companies is gonna walk away with a whole lot of money, right? And so GBR, which is representative of one manufacturer, arrived in town with a severe attack of laryngitis. And when he arrived, and it was his turn to present, it was his turn to have this opportunity. The 2 guys before him had talked about their product. And this guy, he talked about their product. This guy shows up and he has laryngitis. And he totally lost his voice. He could hardly even whisper. And so he was kind of ushered into this room. And he found himself face to face with the textile engineer, the purchasing agent, the director of the sales, and the president of the company. And he stood up and he made a valiant effort to speak, but he couldn't do anything more than squeak. And as they were all seated around the table, he wrote on a pad of paper, "Gentlemen, I have lost my voice. I'm speechless." And then the president stands up in front of everybody there and he says, "I'll do the talking for you." And he did. He exhibited his samples and praised their good point. A lively discussion around the merits of the goods emerged, and the president, since he was doing the talking for him, took the position that the salesman would have had if he was actually had his voice in this discussion. And his sole participation consisted of smiles, nods, and a few gestures. And as a result of this unique conference, because he had somebody else arguing on his behalf, because he literally wasn't able to talk whatsoever about himself or his product, and all he could do is listen to what other people were saying about it, he was walking out of that room with over 500,000 yards of upholstery fabrics ordered at an aggregate value of $1.6 million, which today is about $16 million. It's one of the biggest orders he had ever received because he didn't talk a word. And all he did was let the other person sell it for him. Let the other person convince himself. Because look, these guys were already sold. He didn't have to do any selling. All he had to do was take the order from him. And these guys over here, they literally talked themselves out of the sale, more than likely, by focusing too much on all the crap and by trying to sell themselves instead of letting these people sell themselves. They were trying to sell, and they failed. This guy was physically incapable of selling, and he succeeded because they sold themselves. They argued for themselves instead of trying to be sold and then, coming up with these objections. They were literally arguing for him. And so it's critical that you don't interrupt people when they're doing that. This guy knows that he would have lost the contract if he hadn't lost his voice because he had the wrong idea about the whole proposition. And he discovered quite by accident how richly it is to sometimes let the other person do the talking. Because when you let the other person do the talking, it helps in family situations, helps in business situations, helps in all situations, and it totally changes the tables, it flips the tables, and it totally shifts the significance and the focus to those other people. And when other people have focus on themselves, when they have that significance, when they are the center of attention, they're gonna feel much better about actually moving forward with whatever it is you're doing. Same thing here, right? You have an example with Barbara Wilson. The relationship with her daughter, Lori, was deteriorating rapidly. And Lori, she had been a quiet, complacent child and was growing into an uncooperative, sometimes belligerent teenager. Just, basic kid problems, right? And Miss Wilson lectured her, she threatened her, she punished her, but all was to no avail. Then one day, Miss Wilson told one of the classes that she just gave up. Lori had disobeyed and left the house to visit her girlfriend before she had completed her chores, and when she returned, she was about to scream at her for the 10,000th time, but she just didn't have the strength to do it. So she looked at her and she sadly said, "Why?" Why? Because she cared, but not that much. And so she sits down with her and she says, "Why?" And then everything freaking pours out of this girl. Lori says, "Do you really want to know?" And so she nods her head and she says, "Sure." And so hesitantly she starts to kind of talk. And then everything flows out. Over the course of a couple of hours, she tells her all of her challenges, all of her difficulties, everything. She wanted to tell her thoughts, her feelings, her ideas. And when she wanted to tell her more, she would be interrupted with more orders from her mom. And she began to realize that this girl, her daughter, needed her not as a bossy mother, but as a confidant, as an outlet for her confusion about growing up. And all that she had been doing was taking when she should have been listening, because literally listening is so powerful. When you can actually hear somebody, it gives them such an insane feeling of importance and significance and radically adds value to their life by allowing them to work through the processes and the difficulties that they have. That's huge. From that time on, she let her do whatever she wanted and tell her whatever was on her mind. And the relationship has improved immeasurably, and she's again a cooperative person because you listen, not try to force stuff, right? Similarly, you cannot interrupt and tell her to do something else, because if you interrupt people, they aren't gonna feel happy, they aren't gonna feel confident actually confiding in you. And they're gonna try to find other routes, try to find other opportunities, find other perspectives, and it will not work. It will not work. You will push them away, you will alienate them by saying, "Look, I'm not gonna listen to you. Instead, I'm gonna interrupt you and say some other crap because I'm more important than you." How do you think that feels to somebody if they say they're more important than you? It feels like crap. It destroys the connection. You need to make the other person feel more important than you. You need to put them up on a pedestal and make them feel like you're praising them. And only then can you have true and expansive growth. All right, you guys getting that? Does that make sense? You understand? Is that cool? All right, awesome. Okay, cool. Now another great example here is with a large advertisement that appeared on the financial page of the New York newspaper, calling for a person with an unusual ability and experience. And Charles Kuberlis answered this advertisement, sending his reply to a box number. And a few days later, he was invited by the letter to call for an interview. And before he called, he spent hours in Wall Street finding out everything possible about the person who had founded the business. And during the interview, he remarked, "I should be mighty proud to be associated with an organization with a record like yours. I understand you started 28 years ago with nothing but desk room and one stenographer. Is that true? Is that true?" Ask the question that will get you the answer that you want. Ask the question that will make the other person want to talk about themselves. Because remember, the best way to sell somebody is to have them talk about themselves and sell themselves. And so almost every successful person likes to reminisce about their early struggles. And this man was no exception. He talked for a long time about how he started with $450 in cash and an original idea. And he told this guy how he had fought against discouragement and battled against ridicule, worked Sundays and holidays, 12 to 16 hours a day, and how he finally won against all odds. Until now, the most important executives on Wall Street were coming to him for information and guidance. And he was proud of such a record, and he had a right to be, and he had a splendid time telling about it. Notice how he doesn't do what most people do when they go to an interview and just talk about themselves. So just say like, "Hey, we're the best ever. Hey, we're the coolest people ever. Oh, we're the best people on the planet. You know, you should hire me. I'm the coolest ever." Instead, he focuses on the other person. He focuses on them. He cares about them. He actually understands who they are, what they do. And he says this, "Look, I put the time, the effort, and the energy in to learn about you and to care about you and to do work for you." You go in an interview and you know more about your boss or the prospective interviewer, and I've done this with startups, with VCs, and I'll research the person, right? Before you go into that, and you talk and you talk and you talk and you talk. You ask about them, changes the whole perspective, shifts the whole landscape, fundamentally separates you from everybody else playing the game because you connect with them on an interpersonal level. Finally, this guy questioned Mr. Kubelis, who's the interviewee, briefly about his experience, and then called in one of his vice presidents and said, "I think this is the person we are looking for," because he talked about the other person. He focused on the other person, and he got the other person to like him. Most people have pretty bad interviewing processes, and you can really influence people just by focusing on them. Mr. Kubelis had taken the trouble to find out about the accomplishments of his prospective employer, and he showed an interest in the other person and their problem. He encouraged the other person to do most of the talking and made a favorable impression, and then he freaking crushed it. Separated himself from everybody else, because nobody does this. Nobody else does this, right? It'll totally wish you away from everybody else and separate the game. Very powerful underlying concept. So Roy G. Bradling of Sacramento, California had the opposite problem. He listened as a good prospect for a sales position and talked himself into a job with Bradley's firm. And Roy reported that, being a small brokerage firm, we had no fringe benefits such as hospitalization, medical insurance, and pensions. And this was back when they had pensions. And every representative is an independent agent. We don't even provide leads for prospects. We cannot advertise for them as our largest competitors do. And so Richard Pryor had the type of experience they wanted for the position, and he was interviewed first by this guy's assistant, who told him about all the negatives related to the job, and he seemed slightly discouraged when he came into the office. And then this guy mentions that the one benefit of being associated with this firm, that of being an independent contractor and therefore being virtually self-employed. And as he talked about these advantages and focused on the positives, he talked himself out of each negative thought he had when he came in for the interview. And instead of the interviewer convincing the interviewee convinced himself just by thinking about these positive ideas and images in his head and thinking about the awesome future he could have. Very critical.